Tonight, the energy around Pittsburgh feels different, almost tense, like something big is quietly building behind the scenes, and if you're a Steelers fan, you can feel it. This isn't just another offseason update. This is one of those moments where multiple storylines are colliding at once, and the direction of the entire franchise for the 2026 season could be decided by what happens over the next few weeks. The quarterback situation is still hanging in the balance. The NFL draft strategy is starting to reveal itself. There are real concerns about key positions on the offensive line, and now there's a potentially explosive contract situation brewing that could turn into a major distraction if it isn't handled carefully. Let's start with the quarterback situation, because everything in today's NFL revolves around that position, and right now the Steelers are still waiting. Another name has officially come off the board in free agency, and that's Kirk Cousins, who has now made his move, leaving Pittsburgh completely out of the picture. What makes this development even more interesting is not just where Cousins ended up, but the fact that the Steelers reportedly had zero interest in him throughout the entire process. That tells you something very important about how this front office is thinking. They are not looking for a fallback option, they are not trying to play it safe, and they are clearly all in on one specific plan. And that plan, whether people want to admit it or not, continues to revolve around Aaron Rodgers. At this point, it almost feels inevitable. Every report, every insider comment, every subtle hint coming out of the organization keeps pointing in the same direction. Rodgers has been in communication with the coaching staff, he's been involved in discussions, and his presence is being felt even without an official announcement. It's like everyone inside the building already knows what's coming, but they're just waiting for the right moment to make it public, and that's where things get both exciting and a little bit dangerous, because while it feels obvious that Rodgers is eventually going to suit up in black and gold, the fact that it's not official yet creates a level of uncertainty that could become a problem. If, for any reason, Rodgers decides to change his mind, the Steelers could find themselves in a very difficult position. At that point, you're not just scrambling for a quarterback, you're scrambling after most of the viable options have already disappeared. Now, there are some fans who are excited about the idea of rolling with a younger option like Will Howard, and to be fair, there are some intriguing traits there. He has the physical tools, there's potential upside, and in the right situation, he could develop into something meaningful. But asking him to step in and lead a team that has clear championship aspirations in 2026 is a completely different conversation. That's not development, that's pressure. And when you look at the roster, when you look at the veteran presence, when you look at players who are likely nearing the end of their prime, this is not a team that's built to wait. This is a team that's built to win now. That's why the Rodgers situation is so critical. He represents not just stability at the quarterback position, but also a level of experience and football intelligence that could elevate the entire offense immediately. If Rodgers signs, everything makes sense. The offense becomes more dangerous, the passing game opens up, and suddenly the Steelers look like a legitimate contender in the AFC. But if he doesn't, then you're looking at contingency plans that feel far less certain. Maybe you explore a trade, maybe you bring in competition, maybe you take a chance on someone with upside, but none of those options carry the same level of confidence. And that's why this waiting game feels so intense. While all of that is unfolding, there's another storyline developing that could have a major impact on the future of this team, and that's the possibility of the Steelers making an aggressive move in the first round of the NFL draft. Not for a wide receiver, not for an offensive lineman, but for a safety. And that's where things get really interesting because it tells you a lot about how this organization is evaluating its roster. On the surface, safety might not seem like the most urgent need, but when you dig deeper, you start to understand the logic. There are questions about depth, there are concerns about long-term stability, and there's a clear desire to build a defense that can dominate in multiple ways. If the right player is available, this is a team that might not hesitate to move up and go get him. And when you think about what that could look like, it's easy to get excited. Imagine adding a dynamic, instinctive safety who can read plays before they develop, who can cover ground quickly, and who can create turnovers. That kind of player doesn't just fill a position, he changes the identity of your defense. Pair that with the talent already on the roster, and suddenly you're talking about one of the most complete defensive units in the league. But here's the debate. Is that the best use of a first-round pick? Because there's a strong argument to be made that wide receivers should still be the priority. In today's NFL, having multiple weapons in the passing game is essential, especially if you're bringing in a quarterback like Rodgers who thrives on precision and timing. You need receivers who can separate, who can run clean routes, and who can create mismatches. And while the draft class does offer depth at that position, the question becomes whether you want to settle for what's available or go after someone who can truly make an impact right away. This is where the front office has to make a decision that could define the season. Do you stay patient and trust the depth of the class, or do you take a risk and move up for a player you believe can be special? That same level of uncertainty exists on the offensive line, specifically at the left guard position. Right now, it's shaping up to be a competition between two veterans, and while that might sound like a solid plan on paper, it doesn't necessarily inspire confidence. The coaching staff has made it clear that they plan to address the position in the draft, and that tells you everything you need to know. They're not fully satisfied with the current options, and that's understandable because the offensive line is the foundation of everything. If you want to protect your quarterback, if you want to establish a running game, if you want consistency on offense, it all starts up front. That's why it feels almost certain that the Steelers will invest a significant draft pick in a guard. Whether it's in the first round, the second round, or by the end of day 2, it's coming. The interesting part is how that decision will impact the rest of the line. There's a clear desire to maintain continuity, especially with players who have already developed chemistry. Moving pieces around can sometimes do more harm than good, and it seems like the coaching staff is aware of that, so instead of reshuffling everything, the goal appears to be adding the right piece to complete the puzzle. And then there's the situation that could potentially overshadow everything else if it isn't handled properly, and that's the contract situation involving Nick Herbig. This is where things start to get complicated because you're dealing with a player who has proven his value, who believes in his ability, and who now wants to be compensated accordingly. And honestly, it's hard to blame him. He's performed at a high level, he's shown growth, and he's positioned himself as someone who deserves a bigger role. The problem is that the Steelers already have significant investments at the same position, and there are only so many snaps to go around. You can't keep everyone happy, and eventually a decision has to be made. That's where the tension comes in. Because from Herbig's perspective, this is about opportunity and financial security. He wants to be a starter, and he wants to be paid like one. From the team's perspective, it's about balance and long-term planning. They want to maximize their current window without compromising the future, and those two perspectives don't always align. If this situation drags on, it could become a distraction. It could affect team chemistry, it could create unnecessary headlines, and it could force the front office into making a decision they might not be ready to make. That's why finding a solution sooner rather than later is so important. There is a scenario where everyone wins, but it requires careful planning. You extend Herbig, you manage the financial structure in a way that makes sense, and you make a long-term decision about the rest of the position group. Maybe that means moving on from a veteran in the future, maybe it means reshaping the roster, but the key is having a clear plan, because without that plan, things can get messy very quickly. And that's really the theme of everything happening right now. There are opportunities, there are risks, and there are decisions that will shape the identity of this team for years to come. The Steelers are at a crossroads, and the choices they make in the coming weeks will determine whether they can truly capitalize on their potential or fall short of expectations. This is not a quiet offseason. This is a defining moment. And as everything continues to unfold, one thing is certain. The pressure is building, the stakes are rising, and the entire NFL world is watching to see what the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to do next.